Greetings, brothers and sisters. So I'm going to do things a little bit different today. I made my normal Hollywood celebrities dropping like flies. This is the one that would cover Britney's divorce, which I was surprised I wasn't getting lots of messages about from viewers on Instagram and everything else. But for whatever reason, YouTube's bots demonetized the video. This is the original video that was 53 minutes. I took a couple of segments out that I thought maybe the bots would have reacted to, and they still demonetized it, so I have no idea. So I'm waiting for them to review both these videos to see what's up. It used to take about a day, but now it takes about 3 days, and I'll release it one way or another, whatever they decide to monetize it or not. But anyway, that's the reason I didn't put out any content yesterday. But in terms of this video, there was an idea that I would cover why the system can't be fixed. I talk about this quite often, and I don't think it's understood. And I wanted to explain it as simply as I could, the fundamental reasons why the system can't be fixed, and make the video just about that. That was my original idea. But then I added something to do with these addictions. You know, I've been talking about RFK Jr.'s sex addiction, all these things. And so there was two pieces to the voiceover, so I decided to make that an introduction and then make my regular video that I was going to make today. But because I want to get a video up sooner than later, and I feel like this is a, important, I guess you would call it, concept, and something that's so misunderstood in the so-called truth community, I thought I'd just release it sooner than later this way. And it's still a long video. So here it is. Greetings, brothers and sisters. I was going to make this a standalone video, and I still might, but I'm probably going to make it an introduction for my video tomorrow. Today is Thursday, August 17th. I wanted to cover something that is very simple, but it has profound effect on everyone in the truth community. You know, the truth community is about, well, it should be about people seeking truth, that you're lied to by the authority. You're lied to by the government, the media, and the whole power structure. Their narrative, the narrative you grew up with, the narrative you were indoctrinated with, is a lie. From a religious authority to financial authority to historical authority, and practically everything else, cultural, social. And that's the first step. You realize you're being lied to and cheated on and all these things. And so you then, what naturally happens is, we got to get rid of these people. We have to turn this thing around. We have to cleanse the system. We got to get rid of what the QBs call the deep state. But that is an unwise use of your energy. And I say it all the time, and I want to explain it simply and quickly here, as quick as I can, because this continuously comes up. And so what you're looking at is a criminal enterprise, starting with the economy, the debt-based usury economy that is illusionary and is a scam, like a Ponzi scheme or a pyramid scheme, and it's run by a criminal mentality. Except these criminals are the authority. They are in charge of everything. It is a generational criminal organization that has lasted for numerous years now. I mean, we're talking about since the 1930s, basically. And they have armies, they have media, they have all kinds of power, religious power. Your religions have sold out to these, to this scam. They have all these things at their disposal. So instead of being a criminal organization that's running a Ponzi scheme, where you can just shut down the Ponzi scheme, try to recover as much money as possible, and give it back to the fools that fell for it, and send people to jail, this is the system. It is the system is a criminal system. Except it's not criminal because they're people who are making the laws are running it. So it's As far as they're concerned, they're doing what's legal and what's best for the country and the world, or whatever, for themselves, or whatever they want to think about it. But in terms of the rest of us, you have to know it's a criminal system. That a Ponzi scheme, a pyramid scheme, a user-based economy is criminal. It's immoral. It's goes against the natural order of things, divine will, and it always ends up in one way, with reality bringing deception to an end. And you have to understand this is a deception, because the basis of this criminal scam is that something that has no intrinsic value, in fact, is debt. It is a IOU. It is the opposite of wealth, right? Debt is the opposite of wealth. Debt isn't an asset, it's a liability. And somebody else's debt, if you own somebody else's debt, if somebody has a debt to you, it binds you to that person, which is bad. It binds both parties together. A debt is something that has to be resolved. And it's bad for both people on a spiritual level. If somebody owes you a debt or you owe somebody a debt, it's bad for both people. You want to just be clean. You don't want these things. They're attachments. They're things that bind you to the material world, keeping your soul from moving on. Thinking that somebody owes you something is you're a victim of something or whatever it might be, is bondage. Or you lording over somebody using what they think they owe you or what you think they owe you or what you both think they owe you as a way to lord over them and extract some form of like slavery from them or whatever is bad for you and bad for them. It's a dysfunctional, abusive relationship that's bad for you. Like you just better walking away from it. If you're somebody who somebody you think somebody owes you something or they do owe you something, just better to let it go and say, yeah, you don't owe me anything, and just walk away. But all of our relationships and all our financial relationships are based in this idea because we have a debt-based system. It is a promise to pay. The government is giving you an IOU. The government says, we promise to make good on this promissory note, the money that you have, that we're vouching for it. The government that lies and murders and spends 60% of our budget on the military is telling you that they're good for something, that they can be trusted. And we know the government can't be trusted, so there's that. But it's not worth anything, which many of you know. And so if you understand that the currency isn't worth anything, then you understand that our system is a complete fraud because everything is based in money and money power. Money power and money are the primary building blocks of our system, right? They are what our system is based on. An illusion that something that is actually a debt is got value. And of course, it comes now with the derivatives market and all the debt. And there's like $2 quadrillion worth of debt. And I've just been saying that for years, but it's probably more. There's no way to calculate it. I'm sure there is, but I don't have that ability. But even on the U.S. debt clock, if you add in the derivatives market, it's about $1 quadrillion just for America. America is in $1 quadrillion worth of debt. And that debt is being traded back and forth like it has value because it's viewed that what's a liability to you is an asset to your creditor, the person that holds your debt. And so they look at that as something that has value, right? It's it's your debt and you owe them this, and they use that on their books to claim they have more money, like something that they're not even sure you're going to be able to pay back or whatever. But what's important to know is that a debt-based system, a usury-based system, we know how it ends, right? Like, it's not a mystery. It's an illusion. It's a lie. And it is unsustainable. And in our system, the interest is the problem. The sorcerer, the entities, I call them the financial sorcerers, that create the wealth, that conjure wealth out of debt, out of negative, right? Wealth is something a positive, something you accumulate, some by work, by luck, by whatever it is. Wealth is something that is, viewed as a positive. It is having an abundance of something, where debt is the negative. It's an idea. It's the idea that you're going to do something in the future because you owe something, and that you have like you've agreed to pay something off. That you're going to, by your labor, by your effort, by your work, you're going to accumulate the resources to pay back this thing that you owe. And that is, a negative in all ways, right? It is the opposite of wealth, and it doesn't exist, right? You're promising something in the future. You're bound to that. It's a form of slavery, a bondage of that your energy and your life force and your work and your efforts are going to create wealth in the future so that you can rid yourself of this debt, of this liability. And the centerpiece there is, in terms of the currency, something that doesn't have value and really is a negative is viewed as a positive. And so eventually that doesn't work out because what's against you is math. And like I said, the interest that goes with it from the financial sorcerers that conjure up the debt, you have not only the debt to pay back, but you have the interest, and the interest is always accumulating. And the interest on our system, like the debt-based clock that we have, is extraordinary. Let me go to that real quick here. So this is the national debt clock. And the big number that everyone concerns himself is with this here, $32 trillion. And you can see it's accumulating here. And the last time I counted, it was $3 million per minute. And the last time I looked at this, it was 31 trillion. And now it's almost 33. You can see it's 707 billion. So it's only 300 billion away from another trillion. So I look at this fairly regularly. And it was just at 31. I don't remember it being at 31. I remember it being at 30, but either way, it wasn't at 32. And so this is the total U.S. debt, including all kinds of things like credit cards and whatever. This is the personal debt here. So the personal debt that people owe, credit cards, mortgages, car loans, whatever, is 24 trillion. And here, this is the total U.S. debt is 102 trillion. So that's what we owe, like 102 trillion, like an unfathomable number. And so this is the income tax, and it's gone up. This is the revenue that income tax has generated. So this is the budget, the amount of money the government has to spend on all of the governmental spending items. This is the money generated from income tax. For the last so many years, it's been 3.3, 3.4, 3.5. Now this year, it's up to $4,600,000,000. But our budget exceeds the income, right? Like this from your personal, whatever your personal income is. When your bills, what you owe on a monthly basis, whatever it is, rent, mortgage, food, car payments, whatever, that you're making less money than you need to live. Like I've been in that situation. Lots of us have been in that situation where your bills and what you owe is more than your income. And we've been in that situation forever. That's why we have this here, the U.S. national debt, because this isn't enough to cover our expenses. And with that, there are these things called unfunded liabilities. And these are things that aren't accounted for. And all these numbers have gone up extraordinarily since the last time I looked. This was at 150 the last time I looked. Now it's at $193 trillion. Medicaid, Social Security is at 22, and Medicare is at 35. So at some point, they're going to have to tell you that your Social Security is gone, that whatever you've been putting into the Social Security system is not coming back to you. And they're going to have to do that some way in the future because they can't pay it. These are unfunded liabilities. These are things that they have no money to pay. They are things that are promised and are accounted for, but they're not accounted for. There's no money for them. There's no budget for them. There's nothing. The Social Security tax that you're paying is not enough to cover the boomer generation, which is a large generation of people, unless there's massive die off, which they hope, COVID related or whatever it is, the poop, right? Any of these things. But in terms of Social Security, it's a bankrupt system. They've been taking the money you've been paying in and paying off the older generations, and it's a system that's not going to work with the economy going the way it is. And so that's going to disappear. It has to. And Medicare is even worse. And then there's other things that they have, promised to pay here, almost $200 trillion. And, they don't have anything to pay. So this is another level of that. There's $1 trillion of credit card debt, over almost $2 trillion of student loan debt, just all these debt everywhere, right? This all the red. But what's probably more disturbing is currency and derivatives now is at $600 trillion, 630, and this goes up and down. It was at 700 at one point. So that's $630 trillion worth of debt right there, because the derivatives market is debt. And there's no way to pay that back, right? And so this is the amount of debt where you have $200 trillion here, almost $200 trillion here, $100 trillion there, the national debt, $32 trillion, all this debt. And the income here, the collected tax revenue, $4,600,000,000,000, right? And again, our budget is more than that. So that's all accounted for. So there's no way to pay down on any of this debt, and it just keeps on growing. The interest keeps on growing, and no one wants to admit that this is effed, that this system is so much, and we're so much in debt we could never even conceive of paying it off. We're not going to win the lottery as a country. There's no financial miracle here. The math is against us. The math shows you that it is impossible for us to pay back this debt. The U.S. GDP is $23 trillion, right? And we owe, well, that's the GDP. That's a gross national product. This is 2021. It's going to be less because of the economy. And, that's not the net amount of money that we make collectively. And so we can't pay back any of these things. There's no money left over. We can't even meet our basic needs as a country. Our country is going into debt $3 million a minute, because more debt and interest in things, because we don't have enough money to pay our bills. And it's just getting worse as time goes on, because the more interest that accumulates, the more that goes to the principal, and it becomes revolving debt on a scale that nobody can really comprehend. So this is what $1 trillion looks like. This is, these are pallets of money here. And this is the U.S. Capitol, these other buildings, airplanes, football field. There's various, videos and visual cues here, something that CNBC did. There's $1 trillion. This is $1 bills, and it would wrap around the world over 3 times. Like, it's hard to comprehend all this stuff, right? There's all these various images of what $1 trillion looks like. And it is, something that's incomprehensible. This is what $2 quadrillion looks like, and they can't even comprehend it here. This is a football field and a plane, and this is $1 trillion, right? So this is $1,000 trillion, and $1 trillion is, a lot of money, and it's hard to comprehend of $1 trillion, but you can't even comprehend $2 quadrillion of debt, right? It's beyond the imagination. It's, $1,000 trillion, and a trillion is 1,000 billion, and a billion is 1,000 million. And so these kind of numbers are extraordinary. Like, I don't, how many grains of sand are on a beach, but it's, getting into something like that, or a desert or something like this, where there is, it's might as well be infinity. There's just not, the earth isn't worth $2 quadrillion. The wealth itself, the real estate itself, and all the resources on it aren't worth $250 billion. That's how much debt we have. So I'm saying this because our debt has exceeded our imagination. We can't even conceive of the amount of debt that's out there. I believe it's at least $2 quadrillion, but there's no way to really calculate it because it's growing and nobody's really looking into this because they don't want to know. It's like the thing that you don't want to know because when you know, you realize you're booped, right? That you are effed. But like any sort of criminal enterprise, any grifter type of game, a confidence game. This is a confidence game. That you have confidence, you have been flim-flammed, you have been duped into believing that money is valuable, that money has value, and you have value in your bank account. Like that can be taken away, your savings can be taken away, or the wealth can just disappear through inflation or some other reason. But all these things that you think you own, you possess, that are abstract ideas of money, debt-based money, digital currency, a pension that can be taken away from you, Social Security that can be taken away from you, these promises, the stability of your government, the stability of your financial system, all of these things can disappear in a heartbeat, just like a snapping of the fingers, right? They can be Thanosed out of your existence. You go to your bank account and your bank says, we don't have your money. You go to your pension, they say, we don't have your money. You go to the government, they say, well, we don't have any money. It's just all gone. And it disappears. It's happened to people in the stock market. It's happened to people in cryptocurrency where things that they thought were of value just disappear. Your value of your stocks disappear. You think your portfolio is worth $100,000 and the next day it's worth nothing. This happened over and over again to people who have invested in something that the value just disappears. The company goes bankrupt. The company has a scandal. The company loses money, and all of a sudden your stock value is gone. Money that you thought you had and you thought was promised to you and was owed to you disappears because it was never real in the first place. It was something you never had. It's all an illusion, right? And once the confidence goes, once our faith in the system, our faith in the monetary system goes, the system goes with it. And you see this when people panic and they run to the grocery store and loot the grocery store, and before you know it, there's nothing there anymore. There's no groceries. There's no food coming. There's no, there's no shipping. There's no harvesting of food. There's no processing of food. You have whatever you have left, and the system, our food system, has collapsed. Going to the banking system and asking for your money back. Everybody who is banking at that bank or that branch of that bank goes to the bank and wants their money back, and they say, hey, we don't have it. We've never had it. We don't have your money here. We have some money we can give to the people that come on a single day who want money, who want cash. We usually have enough money for them, but not all their money. If they come in to get all their money, we don't have it here. People who have a lot of money in the bank, they don't have it there. And so you go there and you try to take out your money, and if it's only one person, they can do it, but they don't want to do it because they don't have that much in the bank. Maybe it's only like $100,000, and collectively there's people think they have millions of dollars in the bank. Collectively, the patrons, customers of the bank, and so if they all go, there's a run on the bank. They have to tell you, we don't have your money. It's not here. In fact, it's not anywhere. It's digital currency. The total amount of printed currency is like 5% of currency. Most of it's digital currency. Banks creating currency out of thin air when they give somebody a loan of money they don't have to loan, and the bank says they vouch for it because they have insurance, and they say the person's going to pay, and that's where the whole derivatives market came from, people being given loans that they could never pay back during the subprime mortgage crisis. But we know that all these things are illusionary. I got a comment from somebody that was hilarious. Your system is collapsing, not ours. Don't you put that curse of worldliness on us, spiritualist. I don't know where this person's from. This is from Hollywood Celebrity Shopping Like Fies. Little Tay Fake. This is the video that got demonetized for a while, which is kind of interesting to me. talking about it here. But this person has no clue, right? Because it's a system that's tied together. We saw what happened. Remember, there was an Asian. It started with Japan, where they had a economic collapse there, and it almost sent the world into a state of depression, and that was just Japan. And there was, of course, the 2008 financial collapse, the too big to fail. And what the too big to fail thing means is once the truth comes out, the system collapses. And so too big to fail wasn't the banks, it was the whole system. The whole system is too big to fail because we're 100% dependent on it. But it only takes one. If the dollar collapses, what do you think that's going to do to the rest of the world? If America defaults or financially collapses and goes into depression, we're tied together, and it's one world economy. In fact, the inflation that America is now experiencing is being is not as bad as it should be in America, but the rest of these countries around the world are feeling it. They're experiencing inflation because of the world reserve currency and America's overall economic influence. The world GDP is only $95 trillion. America is $21 trillion, and so it's over 1/5 of the world GDP. And yeah, but if there's any major economy that collapses, or currency that collapses, it's going to affect the whole system because the whole system's a lie. All the currencies are worthless. And so this is what's waiting for us. The system is doomed from its very onset, from its very birth, because it's a debt-based Ponzi scheme, criminal enterprise run by a criminal mentality that is against the natural order of things, and it's full of cheaters and liars and deceptors and illusionists and magicians and all these, any word you want to use for people who create a scheme that is not based in divine principle, hard work, and all the ethics and values that go with something that's sustainable. This is unsustainable. It's never been sustainable. And once people wake up to this, it's over. Once people realize, and they will at some point, or they'll just be told, we don't have your money. Once people lose faith and confidence in the system implodes. And we're at that point. We're long past that point. People should have already realized that the system is completely corrupt, and it is, doomed to failure. It's already failed, and we just won't admit it. We're fudging the numbers to keep it going. So that's why I say the system can't be saved. When I realized this years ago, the system can't be saved, and it shouldn't be saved. That getting rid of the criminals that run it and taking over their positions of power would mean you'd have to be a criminal, because this system is a criminal enterprise, and it can't survive truth. It can't survive ethics and morals. A moral, ethical person running this system would bring the system to an end, because they would pay off the debt. And if you pay off the debt, the system collapses. The debt is our wealth. And they wouldn't be able to pay off the debt in the first place. So they would let everyone know, all right, this is the truth. I want to level with you, right? The leader coming out and saying, this is your system. And they'd have to discredit the person and, imprison the person or do whatever. That's what anybody going against the system, and the criminals that run it are as a threat to the system. And that's why the truth community is being, is being demonized and pathologized and censored. Because if people realize the truth, the system would collapse. If people stop believing in the money that they believe in, that they think has wealth, that has value, then the system would collapse. And so there is no fixing the system. There's no replacing the leaders. It takes criminals to keep the thing going, because it takes liars and deceivers and murderers and starters of wars and distractions and all kinds of things to keep, people who are going to fudge the numbers and create distractions and illusions to keep this system going. And if you get rid of those people, the system collapses. That's what too big to fail means. That if you bring justice to something, it should fail, but it's too big because its failure means catastrophic consequences for all of us who are 100% dependent on the system. So that's it. That's our, that's the where you get to as a truther, where you realize the system should fail. It's better for us if it fails because it's hurting us, bringing us in the wrong way, making us weaker, stupider, more entitled, selfish, all these bad things. It's making people worse. It's guiding us in the wrong direction. It's bringing out our lower tendencies. That's that's probably the biggest problem with the system, how it affects us all. It makes us into less, our lower selves. It makes us into the worst versions of ourselves. And so for that reason, it should fail because it's taking us in the wrong direction, away from our souls, away from God, away from our family, making us, individual, selfish people all competing for something that has no value. And we're all like, running around trying to get as much of it as we can. It's madness, right? It's it is a demonic system. It goes against the will of God. And so because of that, it should collapse. But there's no fixing it. So you can forget about all that. Like the part where you woke up and said, oh, we got to change this. No, you haven't woken up enough, right? Because when you realize the true nature of our system, you realize that it isn't that it can be, a few bad apples can be thrown out and it'll be fine. If you get rid of the criminals, it'll be fine. You realize it's a criminal enterprise that needs criminals to run it. It is essential that its leaderships are criminal in nature, are demonic in nature, are, all the bad things that you can think of. Because they're the only people that can keep this system going. From the Bible where Jesus said, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, right? Give to the criminals what is criminal. And that's the whole system, all the things that you think you own. And it can be taken away in a heartbeat because you don't really own them. It is an illusion, a Ponzi scheme, a con job, right? We've all been conned. And so that's that. So then what do you do with it? Like, what do you do with that knowledge? Well, you prepare for its inevitable collapse. And connecting to God is step one. And then gaining the skills your ancestors lost when they left the farm, they left the homestead, they left the tribes, or they were taken away from them, whatever way you want to look at it. And learn to live the way people used to live because at some point that's going to happen. Like you're going to need those skills to survive. And so that's where we are. Like that's, as much as Pockets of the Future has any value here, it's for people to understand that's where we are. We have to connect to God internally inside ourselves and receive guidance from within, guidance from our soul, guidance from the divinity that resides in all of us, and then start developing the skills and building the community or doing whatever we need to do to survive the inevitable collapse of this demonic system. That's all there is. It's very simple. Most people are overwhelmed by that, and I'm overwhelmed by that, and I've been knowing this at least since 2014. So, I realized 2014-15 that this was the case, and I was like, oh, what do we do, right? So this is our situation. And so to go with this, in my last couple of videos, I've been covering RFK Jr.'s being a sex addict. He called it his lust demon. I've been talking about adultery, cheating, and the self-destructive nature of this behavior. And so I want to categorize this with three individual, personal, self-destructive behaviors as well as collective self-destructive behaviors. So the three things that came off the top of my head, and there's probably many more, were gambling, alcoholism, substance abuse, addiction, and serial cheating and sexual addiction and the inability to be in a monogamous relationship. So with gambling, you end up broke, and there's more side effects to all these things, but with gambling, you end up broke. With substance abuse, you end up physically ravaged and mentally incompetent. And with sex addiction, you end up alone. And there's many more side effects, which we'll go through some of them here, just the negative outcomes. But these are all self-destructive behaviors that we know what happens People have been addicts for thousands and thousands of years. People have cheated for thousands and thousands of years, right? People have gambled for thousands of years, maybe hundreds of thousands of years, right? These are things that have existed in the human condition for a very long time. And we know what happens at the end. Like, it's not a mystery. You're not going to be the exception. It happens to everybody who engages in these processes. And the longer you do it, the longer it takes you to quit or to, maybe you never quit, the worse it gets. So with gambling, you are literally betting against math. The math is against you, just like with the economic system. It's a rigged system where the house always wins. And what that means is eventually the house is going to come up on top, because that's the nature of gambling. The numbers and the math, the algorithms, all these things are rigged against you. You're literally betting against something where there is an unfair advantage in the party you're betting against, right? You're betting against the house, and whatever system they're using, whether it be cards, whether it be sports, whether it be, the lottery, whatever it is, they have the overwhelming advantage of math on their side, right? And history, because most people who are gambling are losers who want to lose. You just want to hand your money over to them. And you can see the effects of this by going and living in or being around Las Vegas for any period of time and see the amount of money that they have for parks. Las Vegas is one of the financially, look at they just built a $2 billion stadium for the Raiders. It is one of the most financially successful cities. Any of these gambling cities are, because people are just literally coming there to throw money away. People are just coming from all over the world to give their money away to these legal criminals that are running this rigged system. You know it's rigged going in. You know that they're doing really well. You can see the opulence right around you, because people are just handing them their money. And people do it anyway. It's saying you want to give your money away. You want to lose. It's a self-destructive element to it, because, you might win the first time. In fact, more often than not, you're going to win the first time. It's just how it is. Like a drug addict who gives you drugs and you're being lured into it. Like the first time you gamble, you're going to win. And there's some, early on you're going to win. And you're going to have this feeling that, wow, this feels great. I'm going to get this feeling again. And you're going to remember that feeling, but not the feeling of losing that's going to happen over and over again. And every once in a while you're going to win again. It's going to make you feel good, and you're going to remember that feeling, and that you're going to put more importance on that experience than you are on the multiple times you lose and the multiple times you're depressed. And then when you gamble away your family's money, and there's so many different side effects to this. You end up broke, lonely. Often it involves substance abuse and other, these things all are intertwined. Cheating and sex addiction and all these things go along with it, right? These are all addictive tendencies, and they intermingle. Most people who have a gambling addiction also have substance abuse issues and trouble being in monogamous relationships, being a monogamous person. And so these things are all, again, intertwined, and the side effects are there. But it's a willfully self-destructive, self-hating, self-loathing act to give away your hard-earned money to criminals and people who don't deserve it. And that also is our economic system. Then there's addiction. Now, addiction has physical components. There's painful consequences for not feeding your addiction. There's a psychological effects as well. But we see, you can see people who, you look at meth addicts and cocaine, crack addicts and opioid addicts and even caffeine addicts and cigarette addicts. It has an effect on your body. Like, first of all, there's the physical effects, and nobody escapes these things. People die of lung cancer from smoking. People die of liver disease from drinking too much alcohol, and then a host of other health issues for any of the other more stronger drugs, which ravage your body. You're literally putting a poison into your body. All of these things are toxic for your body. They impair things. They make your body function. It impairs your body's ability to function. As soon as you start drinking alcohol, it negatively affects the parts of your brain, the first symptom, that gives you the ability to self-perceive, see yourself as others see you. That's why you act foolish when you drink. And you become, loose-lipped, and you say things that you shouldn't, because you lose that ability to self-perceive. And then it affects your brain in other ways. All these drugs impair your ability to see reality. They impair your ability to function. And then there's the after effects of taking a toxin, which is a hangover, because you've just taken a poison that is changing your perception of reality. And then the health effects kick in terms of taking a toxin. It's always going to hurt your liver, because your liver is there to process toxins, and the more toxins you take, the more poisons you take, the harder it is on your liver. And then there's the effects of each specific addictive substance. And the effects are devastating to your physical body. And then your mind breaks down. And when your liver doesn't have the ability to work and detoxify your system, you become a toxic person. You have toxins in your system that your body doesn't have the ability to expel. It warps your reality on a daily basis now, because your ability to perceive reality is warped by the toxicity of your body. And then there's spiritual effects, and then the effects on your relationships, your ability to hold a job unless you're Hunter Biden, or somebody. And then there are things like paranoia and the rest of it. So all of these substances, all these addictive substances, things that change your, what they say, your brain chemistry, which is, not a real thing, but change your ability to perceive reality. It has long-term effects psychologically, spiritually, and physically. And everybody knows it. And if you sober up for a little bit, you see the damage that the addiction has done. And you get, you free yourself from the physical addiction, but then you go back again. And then there's the gambling and the infidelity, and things also go hand in hand with that. And then with the infidelity, Kennedy's lust demon. Again, these are all self-sabotaging, self-hating acts. You're hurting yourself. It's like you're punishing yourself by doing something that you think is for gratification. In terms of cheating, most of these cheaters, womanizers, or I guess we don't know what the female version of that is, I guess a hoe or whatever. But having lots and lots of partners and not being able to live within the confines of a marital relationship, a monogamous relationship, all these people who have had all these interactions with people, all these sexual interactions, all these relationships, ultimately die alone. They lose their ability to trust other people because of the way they behave. They become cynical. They become, hardened, and they just really can't open up and be in a healthy relationship. My brother told me a couple of years ago, he is someone who had a sexual addiction and a, inability to be in a monogamous relationship. And, I saw all the things the effects of that in his life. And he's basically all alone. His kids he has, still some sort of relationship with his kids, but it has never been the same since he left his wife for another woman, a crazy woman who I talked about in an earlier video. And, he called me, we were talking maybe 2 years ago, and he was a caretaker of the ashram in Molina, Georgia. He's there by himself. He's been there for years on and off since 1995, 1996. And there's nobody there. He's there. It's a couple of buildings, not nice buildings, big staircase, that he had physical troubles. He had both of his hips replaced, going up and down those stairs, and he was in his 70s now. And, some of that had to do with it. But he's just there by himself a lot of the time, which is, difficult. The internet isn't really that great there. He had a TV or something. But, very lonely. I think he's on the phone with people. He has a few friends. But really just, all alone, and just has been all alone for a while. And he told me he met this woman. She was, I guess she was around his age, maybe a little bit younger. She was somebody from some maybe South American country. And they were going to retire together in Florida. They met playing pickleball, which I had never heard of at the time. And, it seemed like a good situation for him. They were condemning the ashram. And of course, those of you who know about the corruption of the heartfulness system. And, I was just figuring that out. That was like pre-COVID. And things were going bad there. And since then, the mission has imploded, and my brother, according to my sister, we're not, speaking. um, but, did have to do with COVID and the bloop. But anyways, he, has been relocated. So he was living in this ashram, which wasn't an ideal situation. And the only reason to live there is that there would be these gatherings. The gatherings were great. There would be 3 or 4 of them a year, and then people would come up on Sundays for group meditation. But it's not being utilized. It's just dilapidated, broken down. My brother was up there all alone. Not a healthy situation. And now he's being reassigned. I don't know what that even means. And so he had this opportunity with this woman, and, he was going to retire with her and spend the rest of his life. But then I called and I asked what was going on with that, and he said the engagement was off, that they broke up, and he didn't really elaborate. But he had been a womanizer and a serial cheater, and he's, going to die alone. And there's lots of people like him, right? Because there's just an inability to commit and be in a lifelong relationship, and, the ups and downs and all these things. And so you have these people who have been in so many relationships, sexual and, whatever the other aspects of it are. And they're extraordinarily lonely, and they don't trust anybody because they think other people are like them. And so, there's that. And then there's, financial ramifications for this. I mean, you can have serial cheaters that are wealthy, but for the most part, there's going to be, usually there's substance abuse and these other aspects of it, right? And so all these things, it takes a toll on you psychologically and physically. Human beings are social, and being all alone and, having to deal with life's problems without a support system and people you can trust, and you need love and all these things, right? Things that you need, love and affection and all of it. And so, there's a negative effect for this. And it's self-destructive, right? It's another self-destructive behavior. And I'm saying all this because it's a part of the economic system, which is a self-destructive system. It's a collectively destructive system. Because we know how all these things end. We know how a debt-based economic system ends. We know how a gambling addict or a substance abuse addict or a sex addict's life ends. We know what the consequences are. We know how it all ends, and it always ends poorly. It's failed. It isn't a good way to go about things. You are doing something that is, a known entity, and the effects are there. The failure, the heartbreak, all of it, right? The lost opportunity, the physical and psychological deprivation, the breakdown of the human being. And they're crushed by their failure and their self-hatred and their self-loathing and their inability to do things that are good for them. And people like that, let's talk about this with Kennedy, are a ticking time bomb. They are always going to do something that self-sabotages and has ramifications, and it blows up, and all the people that are involved with this person blow up along with it, right? You all suffer the consequences of their self-hatred, their self-loathing, and self-destructive nature. And then when most people in society have that self-hatred, they don't want what's good for them. And everybody can connect with God. I've seen this over the years. 2 things that I noticed recently, personally, and then just, watching it, and what I cover here in these videos. The first thing is that people don't really want a relationship with God. Your ego doesn't want that because God's going to tell you things you don't want to hear. And you're going to have to change things you don't want to change. And, there's a self-hatred, self-loathing, a guilt, a shame, and people don't want to face God. And so that basically F's them for that life. If you're scared of God, and a lot of religions teach a God-fearing person, which is the worst thing to do, then you're screwed for that whole life. Like if you fear God and you don't want to confront God, or you don't want to go in front of God and be, in what you consider to be judged, or what God considers just bringing the truth to light. When you go in front of God, the truth comes out, and people don't want to face the truth about themselves. And you can see this because, I worked as a therapist and a counselor, and I've dealt with this personally. And you can see a person's flaws, and you can see what they're doing wrong. You can see what's hurting them and what's causing them, their self-destructive nature. And you confront them. That's why people have interventions. And they don't deal with it, right? They know it's true. And they react hostilely. They get defensive. They attack you. They break off your relationship with them. I mean, you see this over and over again. They don't want to hear the truth, whether it comes from you, whether it comes from reality, whether it comes from God. They are in denial, and they have created all kinds of defense mechanisms not to see the truth. I cover this all the time. I cover this across the board all the time on these, on the channel. Look at all the comments that I get from people when I say something that they know is true, but they can't deal with. Maybe on a deep level they know it's true, and they lash out at me even though I'm not talking to them because they can't handle the truth, right? It's not because I'm wrong. It's because they don't want to admit that I'm right. They don't want to admit to themselves because it means they have to change. They have to confront their own warped reality, and people just don't do that. And then, of course, all the denial that we see in mainstream media and all the rest of it. So people don't want to face God. But what's the other thing? People don't want to be loved. People don't think they deserve to be loved. I mean, there's people in loving relationships. There are people who are loved, and they don't do that much. I mean, maybe they're good people, and they work on their relationships, and they give to others, and they're lovable. They have a lovable side. They bring out their lovable side, and they're loved, right? And that's a small percentage of the people. There's so many people out there who, when they're loved, they immediately turn on the person that's loving them, right? Like I saw this maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. I started to see this, that people say they want to be loved, particularly women who, are in this, they're culturally and biologically and spiritually programmed to be more loving than men because of the maternal aspect. And they crave, a loving relationship, a loving marriage, a love relationship with a man. And yet they pick the men that they will time and time again pick men that don't have the ability to love them, men that don't like them or want them or value them, men that abuse them, exploit them. And then they meet, a so-called nice guy. I mean, this is the bad boy principle. And after suffering from that for years and years, they finally meet a nice guy, or they've met nice guys all along, ones that actually care about them, ones that would, love them, and they're not attracted to them, right? They're repelled by them. My brother, his brotherly advice to me was, this is when I was in my 20s, hook women, hook them, get them to like you or whatever, and then be mean to them, right? Like that was his recipe for a successful relationship. And, and it worked to some extent. He was able to do this because the women would come back for more. They, hook them into the, liking you, and then mistreat them, and they would come back for more. And, there's lots of men that are the same way. And so they go to people that they are attracted to people that will never love them and never treat them with respect and dignity and all these things. And so those are the things, right? People don't feel like they need to be loved. I don't know what percentage. There are people who are in loving situations, loving families, but it's a small percentage. I would say 20% would be high. I don't know. Like, I don't have a ability to have statistics on this. It's a, sort of an abstract thing. And then people are scared of God and don't want to connect to God. And so that's the majority of people, and that is why our society is the way it is. That's why we have an economic system like we have. That's why there's substance abuse. That's why there's sexual addiction and gambling addiction and all these other addictions and self-destructive behaviors. And a commitment to warlike tendencies and paranoia and all these other psychological issues, entitlement, and all of it, hedonism and selfishness. And it comes from people being scared to connect to God and deep down not feeling like they deserve to be loved. And that's the basis of all these things. And that's why this thing's going to end the way it's going to end. And, for all of us, we have to work on those things, those liabilities. We have to come to terms with our own, our own limitations as a person, and understand that, love is there. God's love is there. And love in relationships is a part of something that's a need. We all need prana. We all need the fundamental energy that's the basis and building block of everything in creation, which is divine love, and then the human manifestation of that in relationships and things. And people have to come to terms with that ability that to be loved and accept, even though that you're flawed, God's love is there for you, and that love can help you elevate yourself. And this is why people start the Sajmark meditation, feel the transmission, which is God's love, and then find a way to F that up and quit, right? Because they have it, they feel it, they know they need it, and yet they think they don't deserve it, so they find a way to run away from it. Okay, so that's the introduction. Let's get into the other stuff here.